What is it you're putting off indefinitely? Yesterday's video, we talked a bit about how strategically, intentionally, tactically, we can consciously make a choice to let some things be put off indefinitely. That not all things are equally worth doing. Now, today's going to talk about the other side of that problem, where part of why sometimes we get lost in those details, and yesterday's video was about not getting lost in, is because it allows us to put off things that are much more important. Things that can't be put off, things that shouldn't be, but things that frankly are. That time's passing and we're just not doing them. This could of course relate to your personal life, this could of course relate to your business, could relate to your game development project, whatever it is, the things that we continuously just keep putting off in a way that we've not set any sort of deadline, not set any sort of date, not been serious about when we're going to have something to show for it, some sort of progress done. Or even if you can't necessarily put a date on it, as it's sometimes hard if you're new to something, then even just making sure that 1 week to the next you're showing some sort of progress on it. That something's happening. And what tends to happen, right, is that these very small tasks, these very little things, these kind of very optional things, fill up the time when is the only time that we have. And a lot of people feel like they don't have free time. They'll say they don't have free time. They absolutely do. They are just making unconscious choices about how that time is getting drained and lost. I'm sure there's somebody out there who has some extenuating circumstances where that's not the case. I think they understand what I'm referring to. For everybody else out there, it is time in which we are sort of amorphously doing things that really don't need to take as long as they do throughout the day. An exercise that for whatever reason is nearly impossible to get anyone to do, partly because they know what they'd see would make them uncomfortable, is this classic practice of trying to write down what you do throughout the day. Where do the actual minutes go? Where do the actual hours go? Trying to keep kind of just a little log, a little journal of where the time goes, because pretty soon we'll realize what it surfaces is things we're not comfortable facing. Things about how often we're doing things that we would not have planned into the day. That if we had made a to-do list for the day, we would not have written down spending that much time refreshing a certain feed, checking for messages on a certain platform, whatever it might have been. Getting lost in details that we know better than to think that those are as important. And so the thought for the day is just to be kind of conscious of what are you putting off, in part because that's probably important to you. That's probably part of why you're putting it off. Right? You've got this discomfort around you, you've got this fear around you, you don't want to do it wrong, you don't want to give it less time than it deserves. This sort of thing happens, for example, all the time in people's email habits, where there's kind of two kind of messages, right? There's messages where like, whatever, I can just respond real quickly. And there's messages where it feels important. And you don't want to get that email wrong. You don't want to rush it off. And you want to make sure you really read it all and let it soak in and think about it and respond thoughtfully, hopefully even in a better edited way than it would if you just tried to rush off an email in response. And the consequence of that is that, of course, then the email is getting put off indefinitely until it's so awkwardly late by the time you can reply that really that part of the message becomes, this wasn't a priority to me. You would never type that. You would never say that. That obviously isn't why that happened. But that is part of the message that's conveyed after so much time passes before you can actually write back. It's being put off indefinitely because it's important to you. And that's why today I'm asking to really just be thinking about for yourself. What is it that you're putting off indefinitely? Because that can be a clue as to what we really ought to be finding some way to prioritize. Finding some way to be chipping away at. Finding some way to be holding ourselves accountable for. Whatever it might be, whatever kind of line of work you're in, practice, skills, personal issues we should try to do something about in terms of getting untangled, talked through, worked out, addressed, forgiving others, forgiving ourselves, whatever it might be. Today's just that moment to kind of pause, pay attention to what it is you're putting off, in particular in a way that if you don't change something is never going to get addressed, is never going to happen. Right? We prioritize these things that we outside of us have deadlines for work, deadlines for school, deadlines for whatever. But today's to kind of, we're going to remind you, you can give yourself deadlines. In a way, you kind of all deadlines are something you're sort of giving yourself. Usually some other kind of option you could find. But that's going to be our clue for what's important that's being put off. Because I don't want to overemphasize it. Yesterday's message was again about there's things that we should tactically decide to put off indefinitely. Doesn't mean all things can or should be. The reason to do that is so we can better prioritize these things that maybe we've been inadvertently putting off indefinitely. That's the thought for the day. Thank you as always for tuning in. I'll have another video for tomorrow.